Hey, as you probably know, we like to rank games here. We often go into some pretty complicated lists, detailing some weird things and our least favorite things from video games, big and small. But today, look, humor us. We just want to keep it simple. We're talking about 20 legendary games, just games we really loved that we think are worth revisiting in 2025. We need some positivity out there. We got 20 of these bad boys, so let's get started off with number 20. Arcane's a development studio that was always known for doing interesting things, but they managed to break through into the mainstream with Dishonored, a stealth action game that combined the stealth of the classic Thief, the simulation elements of a Deus Ex game, and just the raw power of nanosuit super soldier Crysis stuff, all into one single game. Dishonored really is just like a treat to play, man, because it lets you approach the game however you want. If you want to play as a total stealth ghost, you can. The game even recognizes that you're being extra sneaky by making it so the wanted posters don't know who you are. You can also go crazy too. Kill everyone and everything with relative ease, which has the effect of turning these sprawling gigantic levels that can take hours to creep through into 10-minute fun action sprints. There's nothing stopping you from being a crazy killer maniac. That's just part of the fun of the game. Like, you're free to do whatever you want. It's a sandbox. Just have fun with it. Well, I mean, there are repercussions depending on your playstyle. So if you're violent, the world of Dunwall here gets worse. There's more plague, more vicious killer rats on the streets, more patrols, and a worse ending. While if you take the non-violent route, things are less turbulent and, let's be honest here, kind of less interesting. This is just a game that rewards multiple playthroughs to fully experience it, which actually isn't that big of a commitment because the game isn't incredibly long and the story isn't that intrusive, so playing the game again and again isn't just an option, it's encouraged. At the very least, go through the game once as stealthy as possible, then go through it again with all the outsider powers unlocked just to get a chance at experiencing all that fun stuff. It's just really fun to play. Look, some people, I know it's not perfect. There are some people that don't like the morality system, and other people hate how if you actually want to play stealthily, then like half the powers you unlock are essentially useless. Look, valid criticisms, but it doesn't detract from just how great of a stealth game Dishonored is. Next at number 19, with The Witcher 4 on its way in the next couple of years, of course, why not take the opportunity to jump back into the previous game to get ready? Playing it in 2025 is just about perfect because, like, the hype for the next entry is real, but you won't be burned out on witching by the time the actual sequel comes out. This way, you'll get a nice buffer between games if you start now. You'll need it because The Witcher 3 is a massive game and just a staggering achievement across the board. The level up that CD Projekt Red did here is unbelievable. This game is orders of magnitude bigger than the underrated Witcher 2, but it is even more polished, especially now after launch, updates, DLC, fixes. It's really got one of the best open worlds in the business, with deep and personal, interesting stories dotted all over the place. It's hard to articulate what makes this game so special exactly. It's something you just kind of have to play for yourself. It's the characters, it's the vibe, it's the dark fantasy, also kind of weirdly cozy. There's just something ominous, but also welcoming about the world that makes it a compelling place to be in. Now, the combat can take some getting used to, and some people will just never really accept it, like how it feels compared to like a dedicated action game, but I don't know. I've always liked how the fighting and strategy in the game works. Once you get used to its kind of unique rhythm, there's a lot to like. Now, what's great about The Witcher 3 isn't just the excellent world building and characters, the still astounding detail of the world, or the many unique weird monsters you're fighting. It's also just the game that keeps on giving, with 2 of the best DLC expansions. Heart of Stone is just a series of missions in standard open world, but it's amazing. It's really interesting and has one of the better stories in the entire series. And then the Blood and Wine DLC expansion is just massive. It takes you to an entirely new city with its own fairy tale inspired problems to deal with. Blood and Wine is like the victory lap of The Witcher 3, and it's just an absolute must play. It's a remarkable game. I remember doing the before you buy video for that when that released and just being completely blown away, dude. It overall, with the DLC, with everything, The Witcher 3 is remarkable. And we can only hope that The Witcher 4 is even half as good, to be honest. Now, number 18, look, Grand Theft Auto 6 has a firm release date now, seemingly, and while it's disappointing that the game's not going to be here in 2025, at least we can use that time to give some old classics of the open world crime genre their due. It may be hard to fathom in 2025, but like 10 years ago, GTA wasn't the only kid on the block. There were a few games attempting to take a shot at the king, and while they all kind of missed in terms of that, immense financial success, there were still some pretty awesome games that came out at the time. The good Saints Row games, the good Watch Dogs games, but the one that remains near and dear to our heart is, of course, Sleeping Dogs. It's the platonic ideal of a Grand Theft Auto ripoff, with the budget, style, and polish to pull it off. What makes this game great is that, while on the surface it might just look like its contemporaries, it actually plays really differently, and has a refreshing twist on the usual formula by making it so the protagonist is actually not a criminal, but an undercover cop. It really just gives the story real tension, and this Hong Kong setting means that while there are gunfights, most of the combat is actually done hand-to-hand, using the game's Arkham Asylum-inspired combat system. It was a big thing at the time, but they really nailed it here. It's simple, but really satisfying, and shockingly violent, and really, really reactive to the environment. Throwing a guy face first into an air conditioning unit. This stuff is great. For us, what really makes Sleeping Dogs stand out is just how polished and professional it all feels to play. Going from the true crime games to this is just shocking. Those games are janky and all messed up, but this game that was originally going to be True Crime Hong Kong before it got retooled is just such a big step forward for the developers. So it really sucks that they never got to make another True Crime game or really Sleeping Dog game, anything like this. There was so much potential with this studio that went unrealized. Now at number 17, in honor of the late, great James McCaffrey, why not jump back into, one of the most divisive but fascinating entry in the Max Payne series with Max Payne 3. Listen, I am a die-hard fan of these games. I know the complaints with this one. I know it's a cutscene fest that's constantly interrupting the action with unskippable mini cutscenes. I know that it doesn't exactly feel like a true Max Payne sequel. It's far more Rockstar's Dan Houser than it is Sam Lake and Remedy. That's not necessarily a bad thing, though. As an action game, it's still just one of the all-time greats. And seeing Max try to navigate this completely foreign and treacherous world is just fascinating and exhilarating to watch. And it's just a blast. This is a game from a time when Rockstar was still experimental, but graduating into more serious and cinematic games. And gotta be honest, it's kind of an interesting time. Not that their new games don't have great stories, I just like when they put out more than a few games in a decade, dude. Now, there are more divisive things about this game, like the intentional disorienting visual style and, of course, the fat, bald Max, but I think it all comes together to make something that really works. The actual third-person shooting here is just fantastic. It's the best Rockstar has ever done. It's heavier than the original Max Payne's, but it works for what they're doing. The destructibility is great. The enemy damage and violence, all that stuff is great. The shootout design, the level design, everything is just so on point here, making it still one of the best third-person shooters to this day. And then, the soundtrack by Health, it's an all-time great, man. It's so different from your standard Max Payne game, but it works perfectly with what they're doing here. Since I first played this at launch, actually for review, I think, the airport sequence with Tears' health blasting has been stuck in my head. Max Payne 3 is just such an interesting footnote in video game history. It's a game that does something new with a franchise, with different hands on it. Most of the time, that would lead to disaster on paper, but on this one specific occasion, I think they really nailed it. Now at number 16, Far Cry Primal. It's finally time to go back and give the most underrated Far Cry game another shot, man. Back when it was announced, people were mostly just confused about Primal. It's a Far Cry game, but set in caveman times. Nobody speaks English, and it's all just kind of made up proto-dialectic stuff that they made for this game. They even tried to be realistic, so there's not just dinosaurs running around. It's strictly prehistoric stuff that is at least trying to be somewhat accurate to what we know from the early time. So your weapons are limited to like a bow, spears, and some melee weapons. In a series where at least one game is set in the post-apocalypse and another is set in a neon-drenched 80s-inspired future, this is just like a wild direction to take the series, and you gotta respect them for that. It's not even an expansion, it's a full game. It could have been a disaster, but somehow it works. and is one of the more interesting Far Cry games, especially now when you look at this series. And I gotta say, I did the before you buy for this one. When it released, I really liked the game and everybody dunked on me, but I think history has proven me right, okay? Look, I'm not saying it's completely bespoke. It does reuse the map from Far Cry 4 technically, but it's been altered so much that it's pretty much unrecognizable. Everything else about the game manages to feel distinctly Far Cry, with the focus on hunting animals, clearing outposts, and crafting gear, but the progression is less linear, and there's much less story to wade through. What story is there is simple and pretty effective. This is an almost elemental experience that might seem a little boring to the types who just want to get a big machine gun and blow everyone away, but even if you do feel that way, you should give this one a shot. It's unique. It might win you over. Next, over at number 15, Bioshock Infinite. Let's revisit this one. More than 10 years past its original release date, and this game is still a highly discussed and divisive title in the gaming world. Some people hate it, mostly for the story turns, but there's no denying that the game has a certain value, a staying power that keeps it in the conversation when a lot of other games are forgotten. And there are a lot of great things about Infinite, man. The floating city of Columbia is still an artistic achievement, a sight to behold after all these years. And those sky rails, that whole thing, is just like really cool to ride on. It's clearly a compromised game, being much more linear than Bioshock ever was, and just more of a first-person shooter. And like when you do get to use the sky rails, they're mostly just confined to small arenas where it feels like this ability would have been better suited in a full-blown, more open world. There's no use complaining about what the game isn't, and instead just appreciate what it is, which is like a true, weird creative achievement that may fall flat in a few areas, but remains one of the more intriguing action games. Do I think it lives up to the original Bioshock? No, but I just think this is a really cool, interesting game. Next at number 14, for years, whenever someone got a new PC, you probably know, the first question was always, without fail, can it run Crysis? The game was the benchmark for PC gaming at the time. It was a massive step up in graphics quality when it originally came out, and while the visuals have far been surpassed in recent years, one thing the game still has going for it that was mostly overlooked at the time was just the gameplay. It's fun. The graphics are what got people in the door, but the satisfying nanosuit powers and pretty excellent shooting are what kept people around. Yes, now the shooting has kind of aged, but it was quality, man. The game was split up into large, semi-open world environments where you can explore and complete objectives, sometimes in a specific order, sometimes you're free to roam. Compared to most beefy FPS protagonists, your dude in Crysis is actually relatively weak. Only a few shots can take him down. But with your Special Forces nanosuit, you are essentially like the Predator. You can turn invisible, you can increase your armor, gain incredible speed, or just pump up your strength so you can throw guys around like ragdolls and smash up buildings. Actually, using these powers is tricky because they all use energy, and a major part of the gameplay is learning how to carefully ration out your energy to get the most of it. It makes it so you're both very squishy and vulnerable while still being overpowered, and the combination makes every enemy encounter pretty satisfying. The gun customization is also pretty awesome. We loved being able to swap out attachments on the fly. They like pioneered this stuff and it worked. The game is definitely too short and kind of ends right when it starts to get interesting, right when it ramps up, but it is a hell of a ride while it lasts. Now at number 13, it's 2025, man. It's time to face facts. The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion is good. For years, the common refrain from some hardcore fans was how much Oblivion just wasn't that good because of the tedious Oblivion gates and the annoying level scaling and the dialogue chains that were kind of goofy. And look, I think a lot of us were just comparing it to Morrowind. Yes, it wasn't Morrowind 2, but the game has its own unique special charms. The many excellent quests, for one thing. There are so many iconic missions in Oblivion that are more interesting and more involved than a lot of Skyrim's quests. The entire Dark Brotherhood questline is legendary. The Thieves Guild is awesome. That one mission where you go into a painting. These quests are varied, interesting, and just extremely creative. It's also a more focused game. And while that streamlining can be seen as a negative by some, it does mean there's less screwing around and more getting to the parts that are good. Now, the remake that released in 2025 managed to fix some of the problems in the original game, and while everyone might not love the more desaturated visuals, the game does look downright beautiful at times. Honestly, if anything, this is just a really unique Western RPG. While Morrowind was extremely weird fantasy to the point where it almost felt like science fiction, to Skyrim being a little bit more gritty and grounded, Oblivion felt more like a fairy tale, just typical knights, wizards, goblins, dragons, just straight up fantasy stuff. And for that, it really, really works and is really special and is still worth revisiting if you never got around to it, or maybe you weren't even born yet, because that's starting to become a thing. Now at number 12, rumors of Half-Life 3 are floating around yet again, and even with some of these things sounding more credible than ever, it's impossible not to be skeptical. You don't have to get your hopes up, just have them dashed against the jagged rocks again. Just do something more productive, like replaying Half-Life 2 for the 12th time. Turn on ray tracing and experience the game in like a whole new way. I mean, it's kind of an exaggeration, but I will say these effects can be impressive on the old engine. The real reason to replay the game is just because it's good as hell. Half-Life 2 is so perfectly paced, with so many clever ideas and creative little gimmicks. It's just constantly mixing things up. It's refreshing. FPS campaigns rarely get this experimental, and to this day, Half-Life 2 still feels very distinct for the genre because of all the new ideas it introduces. The biggest and best, of course, is the gravity gun, you probably know, and while a lot of games have tried and failed to replicate its majesty, you just can't beat the original here. This thing is so satisfying to use. All the guns are fun. The Combine are an awesome and intimidating enemy. The head crabs are freakier than they were in the first game, and this game is just an all-time classic for endless reasons. There are some things that people just don't like. Some people hate the vehicle sections because of the controls, and certain story segments may stretch on a little too long, but they're minor problems at best. Like, Half-Life 2 is just a legendary game that needs to be revisited in 2025. Even if all those Half-Life 3 rumors end up fizzling out again, either way, we'll always have Half-Life 2, and thank God for that. Now at number 11, the open world zombie game formula may have been perfected with the original Dying Light. It remains the best game in the franchise. It's better than the developer's previous Dead Island games, and it just works better than Dying Light 2. They had lightning in a bottle with this game. Whatever it was, like what they were doing at Techland, it just worked in 2015. This game is part Mirror's Edge, part Dead Rising, with a little bit of Far Cry snuck in there, which might sound like a pretty random bunch of inspirations, but it just works. Parkouring over this zombie-infested city is exhilarating. The combat is mostly done through hand-to-hand and is surprisingly in-depth and satisfying. It's never not fun to dropkick zombies off ledges and manhandle them into a wall of spikes, you know? Shooting guns may be the weakest of the game's mechanics, but we're still glad it's there. It's only to mix things up a little bit. When they almost entirely removed guns from Dying Light 2, I think they were kind of missed. But yeah, then there's the night sections. I love this mechanic. It always makes you aware of the time, so there's this little like ticking clock in the back of your head that keeps attention up without it being an instant game over if you do get caught out at night. The thing about Dying Light is that it's extremely dark at night. Like it's like pitch black at times. And this is when the volatiles come out. These are like souped up super zombies that are extremely dangerous, especially in groups. So at night you're forced to sneak or just run for your life to avoid them, at least until the end of the game when you finally get the firepower to properly take these things out. It's just really, really good tension. The original Dying Light is awesome, and with it finally getting a proper direct sequel in The Beast, technically, it seems like now's a perfect time to go back and play the first game. The story still isn't winning any awards or anything like that, but it's an excuse to do some cool, fun video game zombie stuff, and that's all that really matters anyway. Now at number 10, with the shadow of the whole loot box controversy hanging over the game, it's easy to forget sometimes that the actual final product of Battlefront 2, it wasn't a bad game at all. It eventually became a pretty excellent Star Wars sandbox. Player counts have surged like crazy around the big Star Wars May 4th announcements and just the overall positivity, I guess, surrounding the Andor TV show, and just like a lot of people are just getting back into Star Wars. This game has been popping off recently, so it's really a good time to revisit. I think what makes this game remain relatively popular isn't just the franchise, which is obviously a big part of it, but it's also how varied and accessible this game is. There's just so many different ways to play if you choose. The arcadey nature of it makes it feel more like the old Battlefields, where playing casually wasn't like seen as like this dirty word. Obviously, there are still plenty of tryhards and sweaties in Battlefront 2. It's inevitable in a game like this, but it's ultimately a less hostile and toxic community when the multiplayer is less about grinding ranks and more about just having fun and honestly loving Star Wars, living out that fantasy, taking your Star Wars action figures and smashing them together in the digital world. Once they took out all the loot box crap that almost completely cratered this game when it launched, it really became an incredible experience, and it's worth revisiting.
They're undisciplined. Use it against them.
Now at number 9, Sonic Unleashed. Compared to a lot of other games on this list, this one is definitely more flawed. Stick with us. The daytime stages, the ones where you actually get to play as Sonic, are just incredible and some of the best things in the entire franchise. And then there's the nighttime settings where Sonic is transformed into this half-baked God of War werewolf clone to run around these overlong levels that are mostly kind of boring and frustrating. Look, Sonic Unleashed is the most hot and cold game in the franchise. It's got the highest highs and some of the lowest lows because man, those werehog stages are dire. Even when you get used to them, it never exactly feels good. So why play it in 2025? Well, it's simple, because of the Unleashed Recompiled fan project, an unofficial PC port of Sonic Unleashed. Yes, this previously console-only game can now be played natively on PC, and that's an incredible achievement. Now, many of the worst aspects of the game have been fixed with a steady frame rate, high-resolution visuals, and tighter, more responsive controls. The load times are fast, werehog levels are less annoying, and the actual highlight of the game, the actual Sonic levels, are more spectacular than ever. They're worth playing just for these. This project takes a game that was an unpolished, weird little underrated thing on consoles and makes it into a true legend that it really always had a chance to be. There's still annoying stuff you have to slog through, but it actually just feels much better to play all around. And most importantly, this being a fan project for a Sega game, it seems like it won't randomly get some cease and desist letter out of nowhere. Sega usually lets this stuff go. Next at number 8, Gears of War 2. Now look, another Gears of War remake is coming, and that's great. It's a monumental first game, that original. But if there's one game in the series that we'd really like to see get the full remake remaster, it's the sequel. Gears 1 is great, but Gears 2 is just so much better overall. The campaign especially, it's just like this non-stop action and emotional roller coaster ride. It's one of our favorite co-op games ever. It's just so much fun. The pacing is perfect. The levels and sequences are awesome. They're always mixing things up or bringing you to cool new locations with weird special challenges to overcome. The new guns are fantastic. And the multiplayer was a lot of people's favorite in the series. It's just a great game from top to bottom. The only real negative we have is the underwhelming final boss. Everything else about this game is just top tier. Now at number 7, in 2025, Riddick is just in the air, man. There have been multiple content creators making retrospectives on the games, if you've noticed, and they've all independently come to the natural conclusion that these games were surprisingly awesome. I've been banging this drum for years. When we recommend Assault on Dark Athena, we really just mean Escape from Butcher Bay, like the remake that comes with it. Athena is also good, and as a little bonus with the remake, it's a solid addition, but the real star of that whole package is Escape from Butcher Bay, which is just so good. You love to see a good prison break, and this game doesn't have one, it has 3. Actually 4 if the opening dream sequence counts. Look, what makes Riddick so great is how it really makes you feel like a predator, stalking in the shadows and overwhelming your enemies in melee combat and with some firearms. The gameplay is constantly getting mixed up to keep things exciting. Sometimes you're sneaking, sometimes you're in full-blown firefights, sometimes you're exploring and doing side quests. There's even a fighting tournament to join. It's a game that's never boring, with an awesomely oppressive setting where you get to play as like the edgiest badass in the galaxy. And I mean that. Riddick is actually cool. I know people like don't think that, but look, if the movies never really caught on, at the very least, we have this game. Is it a product of the 2000s? Does it feel distinctly 2000s? Yes, but it's not enough to turn you away. You should absolutely play this one. Or if you already did back in the day, definitely try it again.
So this is a beast of Butcher Bay, huh? Head of their killing gang.
Next at number 6, look, an obvious one. It's the Mass Effect trilogy. BioWare, it might be in a rough shape now. In 2025, it isn't even clear if we'll actually get that Mass Effect game, like the Mass Effect 4 or whatever the hell it's going to be. But I, for one, am rooting for them to somehow make it work. I hope. You know, the original trilogy may be a little inconsistent, and it may have an unsatisfying ending to some, but overall, it is legendary for a reason. The first 3 Mass Effect games are awesome, and we're always up for a replay given the opportunity. With the possibility of a proper maybe sequel sometime in the vague future, then sure, that's a good enough reason. Why not? Look, we're not going to blow anyone away with, like, unexpected Mass Effect opinions here. The first game is a janky classic. The second game is maybe the best all-around game, even if it dumbed down some of the RPG mechanics. And the third game is kind of all over the place, but still has some great combat and just like a lot of bits of emotional payoff, some really incredible moments. All around, just like a great sci-fi thing. The worlds, the planets, the alien races, the great characters, the excellent voice acting, this really ethereal, great sci-fi music, the action-packed but still tactical combat. These are just great games overall. Now at number 5, with Black Ops 7 coming out this year, now might be a good time to go back to one of our favorite campaigns in the entire series, Call of Duty Black Ops 2. It's not just that they're both Black Ops games. Black Ops 7 is actually a return to the world of the first and second game, with protagonist David Mason coming back, as well as the return of the second game's bad guy, Raul Menendez. So why not catch up on what these two were up to back in Black Ops 2, man? It's a fantastic campaign. That's the only game in the series to go the full choose-your-own-adventure route that elevates everything about it. Now, normally, you know, a know-it-all, like I'm always 10 steps ahead chess master bad guy would be kind of annoying, but when you can actually dictate the outcome, then it's really satisfying. The bad guy is always trying to pull these tricks on you that in a standard campaign, you just get forced to fall into, but in Black Ops 2, you can actually use your awareness of bad guy tropes to your advantage and get one over on this guy. It could be frustrating if you screw it up, but if you make all the right choices and manage to just completely dismantle the bad guy's scheme in your choices, then it's incredibly satisfying. It makes for one of the most memorable and fun campaigns in the series. Black Ops 7 will not have a campaign like this, which is disappointing, but hey, the near future world of Black Ops 2 was pretty interesting on its own, so it'll be nice to go back there for one more tour of duty. And even if Black Ops 7 can't top this, I really don't think they can, the fact that they're going back to kind of embracing some of this old school vibe, I appreciate. Now at number 4, Paramount is seemingly done making Transformers movies for a while. That Transformers Reactivate game is dead, and with seemingly nothing in the future for this series in 2025, I think now is a better time than ever to go back to the good times and play one of the best games that this robot franchise ever got with Transformers Fall of Cybertron. Look, both High Noon Cybertron games are fantastic, but Fall is a step up in terms of control and variety and visuals, and it's just a great game. Play them both, but if you only have time to grab one, it's probably gonna be this one. Unfortunately, you can't get either of these games digitally anywhere, as I think they've been delisted, but physical copies are still out there, and well, if you know where to look, they can still be played on PC too. I've got to give a special shout out to the game's multiplayer modes, which were shockingly great. I remember jumping into these back at launch and just being like, holy crap, they made the ultimate Transformers multiplayer experience. Like, the team deathmatch modes and the horde modes were fun as hell. These were ideal multiplayer modes that perfectly served this type of game and were just far better than they had any right to be. It's a shame you can't really play them now, but the campaign is still there. It's still very good, so at least there's that. I wish this game was easier to get. You know, if any Activision series deserves an updated remaster, it's this one. Long live Transformers, man. Next at number 3, we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of New Doom that started with 2016's now legendary, simply titled Doom. A game that we all thought would kind of suck, but ended up being an all-timer. With Doom to Dark Ages all wrapped up, it's just a better time than ever to check out the game that rebooted the franchise for a modern era and has continued to change. Now, in comparison to sequels, this is a much more humble sort of Doom. It's a good-looking game, but it's not flashy. There aren't huge, insane set pieces or like a bunch of totally radical craziness. You're on a tech base, you're a Doom guy, and you want to kill some demons. That's the game, like back in the original, and they do it really well. So far removed, it's easy to forget just how revolutionary this game was when it came out. A AAA first-person shooter campaign with health packs and maps with keycards and secrets? For so long, every FPS game developer was worshipping at the altar of Call of Duty that they forgot that other types of elements of first-person shooter games could exist. And Doom 2016 was the game that made that all possible and reminded us of that. Compared to how wild these games eventually got, going back to the first one is kind of refreshing in its simplicity. You've got levels, you blast everything, and sometimes you get an amusingly short cutscene where the administrator begs you not to smash something, and then you just do it anyway. There's just a pure simplicity to Doom 2016 that's kind of lacking in Eternal and Dark Ages. They have their own charms, but the purity of Doom is one of its greatest strengths here, and just a great reason to go back to it in 2025. Now at number 2, Hitman. We finally have a new name for the IO Interactive James Bond game, so in honor of that, let's go back to the world of Agent 47 one more time, and make some people have some unfortunate accidents. The Hitman games have been around for a long time. I've loved them since day one, but it took the World of Assassination trilogy for them to evolve into their final form as assassination playgrounds, less about being extremely challenging and more about giving you as many options and opportunities possible. And a lot of replayability with that. The levels are massive, detailed, multi-dimensional. The many ways you can go about assassinating your target are often really creative and morbidly satisfying. And the games still look flat out amazing, especially the larger, more complex maps. Look, these games launched unconventionally. I know when the first one dropped and like how it was kind of like structured weird, it definitely turned people off. But now as a package, all 3 of these new modern Hitman games packaged into one World of Assassination. There's just a lot of gameplay, a lot of modes, a lot of creativity, and some good throwback moments for old school Hitman fans like myself. They just really nailed it. It was a long road to get there, but we're glad it landed.
Trying to help him, and he's behaving like a complete ass. All right, I better go. You know, it's like he knows that I know that he's hiding something.
Now at number 1, okay, like, so maybe you got a Switch 2, you played that $80 Mario Kart World to death, now what? Well, nothing left to do but go back to your old Nintendo Switch library and test out a few old favorites and see how they run on the new system. Look, we could really put anything on here with an official performance patch, but with a new Mario game seemingly a way off, why not go back to Super Mario Odyssey? The new patch improves performance, bringing it up to a stable 60 FPS frame rate while also boosting the resolution in both docked and handheld mode. So this is the best the game has ever looked. Every time I go back to Odyssey, it's always a little bit of a surprise. Like, oh yeah, wait, this is awesome. Like, I forget every time just how fun and creative and satisfying it is. Cappy is a fantastic addition to Mario's toolset. It's incredible just how seamless and natural it all feels after just a few minutes of playing. The levels are some of the weirdest and wildest in a Super Mario game. And I really love just how much the game fully embraces the goofiness of the series. It's just like a breath of fresh air. And as great as the game is, like, we just kind of want more. We just want Super Mario Odyssey 2 with more levels and more captures to screw around in. Kind of like how they evolved Mario Galaxy to Galaxy 2. It would be incredible. I know at this point that ship has maybe long since sailed, but at least we've got this one extremely fun game that's better than ever on Switch 2. So those are 20 legendary games worth revisiting. Obviously, we just wanted to talk about some games we like, but some of them just had a good use case for why it's good to go back to them. Because if you're a gamer like me, you'll take any excuse to just play something old again. But hey, if you like this video and you like talking games with us, clicking the like button really helps us out. We appreciate it. If you're new, consider subscribing, maybe hitting that notification bell because we put out videos every single day. But either way, thank you very much for watching. Let's talk down in the comments, and we'll see you guys in the next one.